Arc is in itself an opportunity for transformational things within IT.
Getting our teams a lot of time back that they used to just roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty, so to speak, doing manually.
One of the things I love about Arc, to be honest, is I can see how heavily it's being developed.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jason Hansen, and I'm the lead PM for Azure Arc. Now, we're joined by a number of customers who are using Azure Arc today. Nelson and Nuno from Millennium BCP, Ethan from Wolverine, and Scott from Greg's. And we'll jump in and ask them about their experiences using Azure Arc. First, I'd like to introduce Nuno from Millennium BCP. Nuno, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Millennium?
Sure, Jason. So my name is Nuno Guedes. I'm currently the Cloud Compute Lead at Millennium BCP. Millennium BCP is a bank in Portugal. It's the largest private bank in Portugal. We've been using technology since we began in 1985 as a differentiator, creating value for our customers, and we continue down that trend to here, to Arc, for instance.
Great. And you brought Nelson along as well. Nelson, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Nice to meet you all. So I'm Nelson. I'm the manager for the cloud team here at Millennium BCP. One of my team leaders is Nuno. He's been in charge of leading all this Azure Arc research and implementation the last year and a half. So
awesome. Thanks for joining us. And then to you, Ethan, you're from Wolverine. Why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, hi, my name's Ethan Brackley. I'm the Vice President of Infrastructure and Services at Wolverine Worldwide. We're a global designer and manufacturer of footwear and apparel, and some of our most recognized brands include Chaco, Sweaty Betty, Sperry, Merrill, Keds, Saucony, and Hush Puppies. Glad to be here today.
And I like that you have that list right off the top. That's good. And we're also joined by Scott Clennell from Greg's. Scott, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little about Greg's?
Hi, Jason. Yes, I'm Scott Clennell. I'm the Platform and Infrastructure Services Manager here at Greg's. Greg's is a large food-on-the-go retailer within the UK. We provide hot food to customers nationally across more than 2,000 retail locations.
That's awesome. So you've got lots of stores and lots of infrastructure to manage. Ethan, let's go ahead and start with you. So how did Wolverine get started using Azure Arc?
Yeah, sure. So at Wolverine Worldwide, we really recognize the potential benefit of managing things like patching and policy administration across our hybrid environment in one tool set. So we got started with Azure Arc in order to help keep our on-prem and Azure environments more closely synchronized.
Awesome. How about you, Nuno? How did Millennium start with Arc?
So we were at a point where we needed a single pane of glass as well as configuration management and policy management, just about the same time that Azure Arc became a preview. So good timeline there to just grab it and run with it, and deploy it, and do very interesting stuff with it.
Awesome. So really, it sounds like, lots of stuff in lots of different places and a lot of jobs to be done to wrap your arms around that management experience. So you mentioned policy and configuration management. What attracted you there in terms of Arc?
I'd say that because we are mainly focused on Kubernetes clusters, being able to take advantage, for instance, of the underlying open source projects like, for instance, Gatekeeper or Flux that Microsoft has encapsulated within a service, brought us the peace of mind to, even though it's based on those common projects, we know that we can count on an enterprise level support and still do our thing, but do it in a proper business model for us.
How did your company get started with Azure Arc?
Yeah, so I joined the organization about 18 months ago, and one of the challenges that I've got to try and achieve is to really modernize and transform our infrastructure. We're currently a very on-premise and what I would think of as quite traditional infrastructure provision for the business. And we started with Azure Arc in order to try and broaden our knowledge and our skill set around the Azure platform and management plane was really the first intention of getting involved in Arc. That gave us a little bit of visibility into how we could and would manage infrastructure in a more public cloud environment.
Interesting. So a lot of on-premises and data center assets, and you're starting your cloud journey and using Arc as a bridge to skill up your teams with the cloud technologies.
That's right. What we saw Arc as being was exactly that. It was a bridge. So we don't have any public cloud delivery at the moment, but we saw Arc as a way of exploring public cloud without actually going into public cloud. And in particular, one of the big drivers for us with that was that cultural change. It was that cultural knowledge at a low risk. We weren't moving business assets into public cloud before we were ready.
That's interesting. And as you were started that journey at Greg's, what services within the Azure Arc portfolio are you using or are you exploring?
Yeah, so we started quite small. We just started with the standard Arc agent deployment and just really that initial visibility. And we started that on a very small scale, maybe certainly less than 10% of our estate to start with. We ramped that up quite quickly because of actually the Microsoft, you'll be aware that there was a security 0 day last year, which was Print Nightmare. A lot of people probably know about that one and remember it well. At the time, we had no central patching infrastructure. We could push out patches, but we couldn't install them because we were still probably that little more traditional in viewpoint that we need to test patches heavily. But in this case, we needed to deploy that patch very quickly, obviously across our entire estate. So what we actually did at that point was we went from a very, very small percentage of our estate within Arc to basically the entirety of our Windows Server estate, because we decided actually if we're going to have to touch every server anyway, let's do that in terms of Arc management rather than going on and doing every server patch manually. So that then brought us into using update management, which was the driver behind that, because then that gave us that capability to do not only the download centrally, but actually the scheduling and actual patching and restarts, etc., of our entire estate from one single management plane. And that was, broadly very successful.
Awesome. And so, Ethan, to you, it sounds like you're doing patch orchestration, patch management. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah, we're using Azure Policy. We're also using Microsoft Defender for Cloud. We're rolling out and getting acquainted with Azure Monitor right now. So very much same story for us. We're looking for that single pane of glass, one place to go manage a lot of things across our environment. We've rolled out Azure Arc to over 500 of our on-prem servers, and using that to keep things in sync for us has really been super valuable. Getting our teams a lot of time back that they used to just roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty, so to speak, doing manually.
And I think one of the things that's interesting about Arc is that, we're attaching sort of Azure-based management into infrastructure that typically hasn't been, connected to the cloud. And this could be interesting inside an organization. So, as you're adopting Azure Arc, what would your advice, Ethan, be to IT professionals kind of dipping their toe in this area?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say it's a powerful tool. Could make your life a lot simpler. Definitely take some time to get to know it, see how you could utilize it in your environment to streamline some of those operational tasks, some of the more mundane work. And frankly, I think it could end up buying you back some of that resource time to spend on some higher and better use of time activities.
No, that's great. Nuno or Nelson, as you've embraced Arc inside your organization, what advice would you have for other folks?
I would say that one thing that I think it went well for us was strategically, Nuno is in charge of all our research and development. So we wanted something that we could build on our existing knowledge. So we have a local team that's becoming more and more knowledgeable on managing Azure and wanted to build on that. But it takes a process of growing maturity, and you need to have some sort of resourcing available so people can try, can test, can fail, can learn to deploy before you go live with such an important tool set. So that's why what I would advise is get somebody that goes ahead of your team and starts to learn things before you to get your maturity up to speed to then you perform larger deployments.
Gotcha. So start small, kind of build a framework,
Yep.
explore, fit to purpose, and then bring that back to the organization.
Create some room for failure and learning, so you can build on whatever you learned.
That's great, because that is one of the things that we really think about a lot, is meeting customers where they are, with their infrastructure and their IT assets, and really being able to get that quick win. In your example, it's inventory. Bring me a list of everything. That's hard for a lot of customers, and then you can add a set of scenarios. It's also great to hear that patch management and orchestration is one, but it sounds like you've also added monitoring and security, really kind of pulling together that total enterprise view in Azure. That's awesome to hear.
No, absolutely. And, again, I think for us as well, a lot of organizations will have the problem with traditional infrastructure of it's very, very heavily reliant on documentation, which isn't always where it should be, let's be honest, for everyone. And the visibility that I think Arc gave us. So there's you touched on monitoring there. So obviously it integrates into Azure Monitor and Log Analytics. And that actually has given us the ability to start to really drive much faster business change, because we can now view dependencies on servers that we're looking to decommission. Whereas before we couldn't do that. That would be a long exploratory exercise. Whereas now we can look at a server and say, right, we can see exactly which clients or which servers are actually accessing that, and really speed up that time to decommission, which for us is a key element in driving forward as we do look towards a more public cloud and hybrid cloud approach, because we're keen not to take some of the things that we shouldn't, let's say, with us on that journey. We want to really consolidate that infrastructure first. So, one of the things I love about Arc, to be honest, is I can see how heavily it's being developed. So when we started on this journey, it was really a couple of components, a couple of features within there. But even in the 9 months or so that I think we've really been on this journey, we've seen the VMware piece come in, we've seen the security piece get integrated. We're interested to see what we do with things like Key Vault, which we know are available in there. This is clearly heavily developed and really, extends that capability set to our on-premise infrastructure. And that's great to see. It's not just the fact that it's a good product, but the roadmap is really, really strong, and actually it's listening to us as customers, I think, because what we're getting here are things that I would ask for, which is great.
Yeah, no, that's great. And as you mentioned, we do have a robust roadmap, and we're definitely listening to customers and their scenarios, as they go on this journey, as you're running IT infrastructure in a hybrid way, and, even modernization and application development are all squarely in scope. So I'm glad that you're on the journey with us. In terms of, looking forward to the next 3 to 5 years, maybe both for your team at Greg's, but also more broadly in the IT industry, what challenges do you see coming down the road over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think just deployment and maintenance tasks being simplified and streamlined has been a big deal. It's getting us from kind of idea to solution a lot faster, which is a huge benefit. And by the way, currently we're all familiar, I'm sure, with some of the lead times associated with physical equipment. Really, frankly, cuts out just a ton of cycles for our project teams, not having to wait on hardware or gear to show up in order to provision something and have something really rapidly deployed.
So start with what you've got and really leverage the cloud-based workflows. Get going.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And so I think, hybrid feels like it's here to stay. Again, lots of stuff, lots of places today, and it seems like we're adding lots of more places and more apps and more infrastructure to run. As you think about kind of the IT challenges that you're facing today, what do you see on the horizon for the next 3 to 5 years, for your organization, for hybrid management in general? Ethan, we'll go ahead and throw that to you.
Yeah, for us, being in the footwear and fashion industry, it's all about speed. For us, that could be, just like I was mentioning a minute ago, speed to solution or speed for a product to market. As far as that translates into how our technical teams work, us getting solutions stood up with speed is going to continue to be something that's absolutely critical to us in order to implement solutions that are really going to effectively and positively affect our consumers. So tools like Azure Arc and the tools within it are going to continue to be huge leverage opportunities for our technical staff.
Oh, that's great. Speed is the name of the game, and I don't see anything slowing down.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. How about Nuno for Millennium? What are the challenges that you're looking at over the next 3 to 5 years?
I think, well, speed is naturally one of those, for sure. We are moving towards a scenario where we look at our workloads growing faster in terms of deployment time, and like, for instance, in 1 week, having something from whiteboard to production. But not only that, but being able to do that wherever that needs to run, either being it on-prem, in cloud provider A, B, C, wherever we're located. And so, for instance, our initiative also with Azure Stack HCI to connect it with Arc as a tool there, but and also as an example for a way that we are moving forward on to create that universal configuration, that universal set of design principles that we just enforce everywhere, mostly with Arc and related features, so that we can run a workload today on-prem, tomorrow in Azure, the next day somewhere else, just to make sure we're generating as much value with it as we can.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, consistency for IT operators, consistency for application developers, really kind of the name of the game there. That's great. I'm curious, last kind of words of advice or thoughts that are top of mind for you, Ethan, as a user of Arc. Any last words?
I would say definitely check it out. For us, it's been a huge uplift. Standardization, like Nuno was just saying, huge benefit for us, along with the speed of deployment and one place to look. Makes it so much simpler for our administrative teams.
Awesome. Nuno, Nelson, any last thoughts?
I would say that, for instance, Arc is in itself an opportunity for transformational things within IT. It's an excuse to do something different, probably better. So give it a shot.
Awesome. Well, thanks, folks, for taking some time to meet with us and talk about your experience with Arc. And I can't say how excited I am to see what you do with it going forward. Thanks, everybody.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thanks.